Hey everyone, how's it going? Do you like love songs? I do. I really like the cheesy ones from the 80s. Bon Jovi sings, I'll be there till the stars don't shine, till the heavens burst and the words don't rhyme. I know when I die you'll be on my mind, and I'll love you always. It's so over the top that it makes me laugh. Or there's Meatloaf who sings, I would do anything for love, but I won't do that. Whatever he's talking about, at least he's honest. Sort of. It always makes me laugh how far these songs are from reality. I think a more realistic love song would say something like, I'll do the dishes for you even though it's not my turn because I can see that you're grumpy and maybe you've had a hard day. And I won't keep a list of things to bring up whenever we have an argument just so I can win. And that's why I've never written a hit song. In James, it says the royal law is to love your neighbor as yourself. Recently, I've been wrestling with how to actually put that into practice, because on the face of it, it sounds like an exaggerated line from one of those love songs. But I think that God actually expects us to do that. This week, I've been reading through James chapter 4, verses 11 and 12. If you want to look them up now, then you can. Just pause the video and look them up. Again, James is talking to people in the church, and he says, don't slander each other. Now, I had to look up slander because it's not a word that I usually use. Outside of the Bible, it means to make a false statement about someone. In this verse, according to the commentary that I read, it means to talk against another person. It says that anyone who does this judges the other person and speaks against the law and judges the law. The law that James is talking about is the royal law that he mentioned earlier in chapter 2, verse 8. And that's love your neighbor as yourself. So if you talk against another person in the church, you are judging them and you've decided not to love them as yourself. So you've decided that the law is not really worth following. The reason I started making these videos was that personally, I know that I need to learn how to listen to God and do what he says. But we're also reading through these verses together in a few groups in our church. Now, one of those groups is a men's group. And in that group, it's been really cool to see that as we've been learning to listen to God and do what he says, he's also been building us into a community. We've come to a place where we know each other quite well, and we know a bit about what we each struggle with, and we could probably easily go around the room and point out each other's faults. But we're not yet at the place where we've learned to speak the truth in love. Until we get to that place, we're always in danger of speaking against one another. Unless what we're saying comes from a position of really caring for the other person, it can actually cause damage. I'm beginning to see that my way of looking at the world is really individualistic. And what I mean by that is I'm always at the center. And I even read the Bible that way, thinking it's all about God fixing me and my problems. But while my perspective is personal, God's perspective is always communal. He's not just thinking about me, he's thinking about everyone. He doesn't just want to set me free, he wants to set everyone free. And being part of this group has shown me just how much my own personal walk with God affects others. If you've been following these videos, you'll know that we've been trying to apply what we read by asking questions. The third question is, what would my life look like if I always lived by this truth? But I've kind of realized that this question is actually too narrow. So I'm going to change it. From now on, I'm going to ask, what would my life and the lives of people around me look like if I always live by this truth? Because what I believe and what I do affects other people. Now, I know this because I can ruin my wife's day with just a few careless words. But I've also seen how seeking God and, so seeking to know Him and seeking to match my actions to my ideals has really encouraged other people to do the same. And as I encourage them, they encourage me. So as a group, we're at a place where we actually need to love our neighbor as ourselves, not just as a cheesy, over-the-top kind of exaggeration, but practically. But how do we get there? I mean, I know I don't love my neighbor as myself, but I don't think I ever have. But God is asking us to do that. So how do we get there? As far as I can tell, the only way is to spend time with God and each other. God's plan for us in the world is to bring people into community, into a family. It has always been His plan, and it hasn't changed. So that means we need to spend time together. I can't really care for someone if I don't know them. But at the same time, if I want real life-giving relationships with people, I have to have a real life-giving relationship with God. He's the only one who can help us love our neighbor as ourselves, because He's the only one who loves us all equally. And He's the one that guides us towards caring for each other. Basically, God wants us to love Him and love others, and we can't really do one without the other. So if you're like me and you want to know how to love God and love your neighbor in real life, not just in theory, I challenge you to read these verses every day this week and ask these questions. What's the truth in these verses? Am I living by this truth? What would my life and the lives of those around me look like if I always lived by this truth? And what do I need to do? And I would also encourage you to connect with someone else who has the same goal, because we're not meant to do this alone. So the verses we'll be reading this week are James 4:13-17. They say, "Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business and make money. Why, you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes. All such boasting is evil. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is a sin for them."